Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Chris here, and today is going to be a production breakdown kind of day. Let's go. So, welcome back. So I thought today we're going to be taking a look at the track I produced for the artist Timea Farr. She's a fantastic singer. We wrote this song together with my other friend Federica, aka Feds. I recommend you check both of them out. And yeah, basically she's dropped this song about a couple weeks ago now, and it's really great to finally have this song out there. So I thought I would take the opportunity to break this down, run through the production a bit and kind of see what's going on. I might even dive slightly into the mix, but I don't want to overcomplicate it too much because we'll be here forever. But let's get going. So this is the song we're working on. The song is called You Should Worry. Just a bit of backstory about how we kind of got started on this. We had obviously planned a session with Timea, Feds and myself to get writing on some songs, and we got into the studio, and this was the second song we had started working on. And funnily enough, the idea actually started from this. We basically got, you know, those little string ball things. You kind of pick up one end of the balls and let go, and it just kind of... That's basically the concept. So we had found one of these in the studio, and I just recorded it on my iPhone, on the voice memos, and we warped it to the BPM, and we got this. And that was literally the start of the song. We knew we wanted to go in the indie alternative pop direction, but we were just like, you know, let's get going. Let's get something on the table. And we were all quite fascinated by this little item. So we thought, let's just chuck it in the song. And it's actually quite quiet in the mix, but we decided, you know, it was just our kind of source of inspiration whilst we were working. So to quickly break down what we've got going on here, the song is divided into drums, guitar, bass, synth and vocals. Now, being a kind of indie alternative track, it's very guitar heavy. I would say guitar and drums heavy, and then there's quite a lot of vocals going on. But let's break it down from the guitar, because I think that was pretty much where we started in the making of this song. So obviously we had those balls going, labeled Feds balls. If I just solo that and the guitars, let's hear what we've got going on. This is how we started it off. So just a little bit of electric guitar. Those chords are pretty much used throughout the song, but we've got this just strummed electric guitar chords. We've got some acoustic guitar, and then that line in the intro plays throughout. So if I go into the pre-chorus, so we've got that nice bit. We've also got this acoustic guitar that's a bit obscure. I'm playing the same progression as I am on the electric, but now we've got shaper box on here that's doing a whole lot of morphing to the sound. It's basically I think it's a sidechain preset that's just kind of opening this filter, but it sounds great. Then it's got another shaper box. Actually, what's going on here? A little bit of funky stuff. This crush repeater is the pattern. So if I take off the filter, so it's doing a little bit of jumbling up the time, but then that filter is just kind of very subtly introducing that to the pre-chorus, which is great. So all three of those guitars sound like this. So that's the pre-chorus, and then the chorus kind of opens up to a more rocky pattern. Fantastic. You can hear it's a bit messy kind of going into it, but that was very much the energy. I was just, you know, strumming along, and once it kicks off in the main chorus, it all comes together a lot tighter. But cutting to the second verse, there's a lot more interesting stuff going on with the guitar. So we've kind of got this Strokes-esque sound going. And then some plucked guitar, another kind of the same verse pattern, and then we're introducing these two extra bits. we basically got that kind of main verse pattern, you could say. And then we're introducing these two more indie, I guess you could say, guitar sounds. And those are, at least to the second verse, providing a lot more contrast in the guitar sounds, which I really like, and, you know, changes things up. And then by the time we get to the second half, everything cuts out and it's more just this kind of breakdown with the original sounds. And then middle eight is just a filtered version of playing the roots of the chords. Fantastic. And then that opens up, introducing some regular, just open chords. And then there's a gap in the first chorus because it's all a cappella, until it drops into the main sound, which is... So it's just stacks of chords, and then I've also introduced these high octaves. Very, very roomy. They've got this huge kind of room sound, as opposed to the dry. And we've basically, it's all playing the chords, but we kind of have two tones going on, where one's a bit more... One's definitely a lot more in the lower end, kind of lower mids, and then the higher one is just filling up that fizz on the top end, and then the same with the left side. It's more like a cleaner kind of driven sound, and then a way more aggressive. So with the combination of all of those sounds, we've now got this thick chorus. Sweet. And actually in this song I'm not even using my amp. Everything is pretty much on Guitar Rig or Stark. It was a mix between the two. So on Guitar Rig I'm using a bit of this Vox style amp, and in Stark we've got this British amp and then this American amp. So I would assume a Fender and Marshall, one or the other. Don't really mention it, but that's what Stark is giving me. All plugged in direct. Fantastic. I am a fan of that. Saves a bit of faff. Let's move into the drums, because there's a lot of interesting programming going on in the drums. Obviously we've got those little balls kicking off throughout different parts of the verse and the chorus, just to add a bit of percussion, I guess. But the majority of the drum sounds are coming from here, this drums folder. Even though it might not look like much, I've got a copy of Superior Drummer. Looks a bit like this. Now this is very much the majority of a kind of that indie rock drum sound going on. There are some additional drums on top of it, but I've basically gone in and programmed a pattern. It's probably, you can see it here, there's a bit of programming I was doing, and then I would have dragged that out and finished it here into this section. So these are all the drums, and then I've just got some audio tracks where I have routed basically the mixer built into here. You can see here it comes out onto all of these channels, and I've just routed them to here so I can mix them separately and bounce out some stems and actually work with it as if I was working with a real kit, which is fantastic. Just to give you an example of what they sound like, I'll play the second verse. And then by the chorus, it really kicks off. Great. So that's the majority of the acoustic drums, at least. There's a little bit of compression and distortion going on the bass. I've got that, and then this. But again, in the mixing, I probably would have left those off and then put them back on in the mixing project so I could adjust them if needed be. So let's quickly, if I minimize that, we can look at the rest of the drums. So if I actually just solo the drums and remove the acoustic drums, we can hear what's going on in the programming. So in the verse, So we've got this electric kick. So we've got two types of electric kicks. I guess this first one is maybe a bit closer to an acoustic kit, but still just different to what we've got in the main program drums. We've got this small snare. This is actually played throughout the track. It introduces in the beginning, and let me get the guitars going. So this plays throughout. This is kind of our snare up until the pre-chorus, chorus area. We also have a tiny riser that takes us into that section. A little reverse cymbal going on in here. So now we're introducing that kind of first kick as well. And if I put the drums on top. Nice. So it's that. And then by the second verse, we're also introducing that second snare. Kind of like a Linn drum sounding snare, as well as by the pre-chorus, some claps. So all together, that sounds like this. Sick. And then towards the end, obviously, we've got a few more risers to bring us into that last chorus. Sweet. So that's basically all of our drum programming. Not too much crazy stuff. The majority of the work probably went into just programming the drum MIDI and then getting that and selectively picking out the sounds to add on top of it. This drum MIDI, I don't know why it's here because I'm not actually using it, but whatever. We've got that. And those are our drums. So let's move on from there onto the bass. There's a couple different bass things going on. Every kind of section has its own bass, but it's a mix between using an electric style bass and the sub. Nothing too complicated. I don't think there are any synth basses, but these dark purple ones will be the real electric basses, and these will be the synth subs. So the soft one is just a long playing out the notes bass. And then this verse bass is a bit more plucked. And then in the middle 8 and chorus, similar thing, bit more driven in this case, so we're getting a bit more character from that. And as well, we're probably hitting the lowest notes throughout the song because I tend to save the low octaves for the really heavy parts. So what's going on here, that drive will also give me a bit more clarity. And then we've got the bass subs. So here in the end of this pre-chorus, it's more like just adding a heavy weight to kind of add to the section, which is actually a bit of a breakdown before the middle 8. Just giving us this heavy pulse on the one, you know? And then in the middle 8, when everything drops out, we just get a long sub. That's cool. It's got a little bit of glide on it, and then you can hear the electric bass layer in on top of that. So if I mute the guitar, you can hear those two. And then in the chorus, because there's so much going on, I opted to have that synth sub be a bit more kind of plucky staccato sound. And at least like that with these two. They're not taking up too much space and making the mix muddy. So the bass plus the guitar. Fantastic. So we've got that, and that is our guitar, bass, and drums. Let's check out the synths. These are more ear candy kind of sounds. There's not too much going on. Usually I will always create a bunch of OP1 channels, and I'll just use this to make some weird sounds because it's always really good for that, I find. Let's break it down. So to start from the top, we've got the Juno starting us off in the verse with a pad. Very subtle. I'll get the guitar in there. So not doing too much. Just adding a little bit of, depth to the sound. Here we've got this bell. Nice little pluck. We've also got this pad going on. A little bit of auto pan, some reverb. Nothing crazy, some distortion, a bit of a filter. And then the chorus is nothing. Going into the second verse, this is where the synths kind of pick up a bit. So we've got this pluck and this lead. Let's just give it a listen. I'll break it down. Sick. So in the second verse, it's kind of we're doing the same as the first, but obviously the guitars pick up, the synths pick up. So if I just solo the guitars and the synths, we can check out what's going on. So we've got this pluck going on first. And that's again just to help with the movement of the verse. We've got this nice high pitch lead to kind of fill up that frequency a bit. The OP1 stuff comes in. So again, a kind of more midsy lead to fill up this reverse kind of fluctuating pad. Similar vibe, but now this we've got double the trem on it as opposed to this. And then lastly this lead. All similar sounds, but I guess being processed differently. The filter comes in just at the end of the pre-chorus to smooth that out and create some space for the break into the middle eight. And so that's a lot of the synths going on. We do have in the middle eight this kind of tension sound, which sounds like this. It's just kind of doing one note, but I'm playing with the pitch bend on the keyboard just to give it this kind of energy that something is coming. And then we've got that theremin sound from really low in the register just to add a little bit of heft to the build up. And then when the chorus comes in, so this theremin and then this reface, which is my Yamaha CS up there. And that's actually, I've got a patch here, but I've clearly frozen it because there's a bunch of plugins going on. So that's what we've got there. So all in all, not too much on the synths side. And then lastly, we have the vocals. Now, I do love a bit of vocal production. So there is a couple of things going on here. And, you know, this song required a little bit of extra time because we were struggling to find a register which really benefited the singer. And I think by the end of it, we found a place that really worked well because the choruses were at a really solid place where she can project and be really powerful. And then the verses were at a really good place where she can be a bit softer, a bit lower down in the register. And so most of the lead vocal is all of these takes here. You can see I've gone in, I've done some work, I've separated the breaths because I like to have them on a separate track for mixing. And then the verses, pre-chorus, chorus, vocals, and then the middle eight where we've also got a little layer, a couple of layering going on, and then all of the BVs, which is, we'll get into that. But the lead vocal, there's obviously some processing going on as well, but I did end up taking it off for the mix because I usually just copy this stuff over. It's more for the demo sake before we've started mixing, that when the artist can hear, they've got a nice polished vocal sound. So let's quickly just hear that. I'm gonna blast the verse.
4 a.m. is usually when you go pretend you never lived a year like that. I could tell you want the time back now.
Sick. Yeah, I mean, not too much going on. We've kept it pretty dry in this demo, but now I'll show you the mix where it gets a bit more creative with the effects. In the BVs, this is where we've got some proper stacks going on. So in the last chorus, we've got plenty of vocals that we recorded when I was back home in Malta. And the first chorus is more of an introduction because we cut out a lot of the instrumentation so we don't go too all out on the BVs. But basically,
does she ever do you like that?
We've got two, which are the main double. Basically, they're just copying the same as the lead, and these are an octave lower. The only thing is these high ones were actually in the original key, so I believe we had to push them down, -3. So the original key of the song would have been here.
Does she ever do you like that?
And we've just pushed them down to here.
Does she ever do you like that?
So you can hear it even provides a bit of that kind of granular sound to it, but in context, everything just sounds thick.
Does she ever do you like that?
And then in the last chorus, we add some weight to the backing vocals by mainly stacking up loads of vocals here.
Does she ever do you like that?
And besides those main initial backing vocals we did. But the main thing that kind of makes it sound a lot thicker is the fact that we've recorded these BVs with all three of us in the room just singing into the microphone, like with the microphone way far away from us to really capture that sound of the room.
Does she ever do you like that?
So we've got an octave down, 2 takes of an octave down.
Does she ever do you like that?
A kind of middle register where we're singing mainly the root and then kind of moving it slightly. So we've got 2 of those.
Does she ever do you like that?
And all of these are going through I assume a master reverb. Yep, this Valhalla room, which looks like that. And then into this UBK one, which is probably doing a lot of compression on the room.
Does she ever do you like that? Think of me right.
And as well as
Does she ever do you like that?
those are the main kind of doubles.
Does she ever do you like that? Does she ever do you like that?
And that's the same thing, but just me singing an octave lower just to give us a bit more low end in that register. So all in all, you get this.
Does she ever do you like that? Think of me when it's her that you're holding.
And so that plus a couple ad-libs that we did towards the end.
Do you like that?
And plus these.
Do you tell you not lonely? Do you tell her that you're lonely?
And so all of those with the instruments, we get this.
One inside, you tell you not lonely. Does she ever do you like that? Think of me when it's her that you're holding.
Again, in this presentation of the song, as in the production stage as opposed to the mix stage, it's going to sound slightly different, but that is the majority. I did add some layers into the verse just to, again, give it a little bit something to lift the vocals.
Boring. For how long could you keep ignoring fate?
Lying.
That's the only time you'll ever hear me singing, but there is that in there just to, again, fill up the vocals slightly. And that is basically all of the production on this song. It's not a super complicated song, it just required a lot of layers to help thicken it out. But let's quickly take a look at the mix, show you what I've got going on. Alright, so we've got the mix loaded up here. We are now in Pro Tools, so slightly different vibe going on. Basically, it's exactly the same: bass, drums, guitar, synths, and then all of the vocals. As you can tell, there isn't as much processing going on in here because I did do the majority of the processing in Ableton, but I do have a lot of this kind of bus processing going on, where in this case I've got the drums on this channel. You can see we've got a couple of things here, and again these guitars have a couple of things, not too much. Synths here and there. It's mainly a lot of leveling. I can actually unmute all of these because I was probably bouncing stems. And yeah, that's the majority. And then obviously all of these effects. But let's quickly look at what's going on. I have to give a quick shout out to my bro, Mr. Jordan Timms, because I was struggling a bit on this mix, and he helped me really bring it to life by doing some insane saturation on everything. But that's what I love about him, is he's super heavy-handed with mixing, and it's very creative. So let's quickly dive in now. Just give a listen to the drums, because in the chorus they properly smack. I would say the majority of the sound is probably coming from this devil lock. It's doing the hardest bit of compressing and saturating for sure. But then we've also got a bit of limiting, clipping, some center to just really push the kick and snare up the middle of the mix. And some, cutting out of some frequencies that aren't that great. There's a lot of compression in general. I'm a fan of compressing pretty much the sound to make it smack, but I also like to make use of parallel compression. So here I've got these two different types of parallel compression that I use. Along the way you'll probably see like this kick and snare, I'm using the compression on the SSL channel just to provide again a bit more of that sound. I just really want everything to smack in your face a bit in this one. So looking at these drums, if I mute the kit, that's what the electric sounds are like. And then we put in the drums with the bass. Not too much going on, I guess. There is a bit of saturating in the second verse, I guess this is. Yeah, so here the Sans amp is providing loads of sound to the bass. Bit of sculpting with this, nothing too crazy actually. Oh no, nothing going on at all. Nice. A little bit of a dip and a boost. Similar kind of vibe, just more sculpting the low end between the kick and the bass. And then the guitar again, mainly adding a bit of saturation, smoothing out some of those peaks in the guitar, because there's a lot of heavy distorted stuff going on. And this was something that was new that we tried. This is a Jordan technique, so I'll praise him for this. Sending the electric guitar into a clipper. So we're really kind of attacking any of those heavy peaks and then putting that through a tape. So once it's hitting the tape, it's already kind of compressed because the clipper is trimming off all of those peaks. So we can use that and just push it into the tape. And now you have a very controlled guitar sound to drive into the tape. A little bit of delay, I imagine a slap. Yeah, there's a 32-second slap going on here. A little bit of compression. I do love this DBX on guitars. It does just really add some solid transient to the guitars, and then EQ to just kind of create space for all the elements and making them sit. And then in here, got this delay which is actually being panned to the opposite side of the guitar to give this kind of more stereo effect. Sweet, not too much going on. We've got a couple of EBow effects in here, which I imagine were added actually during the mix because we couldn't find them in the production. So let's quickly give a listen to that. All panned, hard left and right, and then I'm just processing all of the EBow stuff as one whole thing. So let me quickly remove the bass and the drums and we can just listen to that. If I cut maybe halfway in, so get some reverb, some distortion, some EQ filtering off a lot of that, and then compression to keep it all in check. And that's kind of during the middle 8 where things get a bit eerie, a bit spooky. So we use that to just kind of add to that space. Let's unmute everything.
Did you find what you've been looking for? You never wanted me to go to a zoo. You never wanted me to speak my mind. Did you ever want me at all? You know I never had the place to fall.
Sick. So we've got that. Hop back into the mixer window. The synths, we don't have too much stuff going on in terms of processing. It's a lot like making stuff stereo or some saturation and EQ to filter out specific parts. But I would say the majority of the importance in this section will be the effects, because I have a pretty elaborate effects section that I've set up. So let me quickly play these two sounds. This brass is on the OP1, it's an OP1 patch, and then this would have been the same thing, but we are sending this into a Neve style channel strip. I'm not doing too much by the looks of it, a bit of compression, a slight bit of EQ, barely, and but I'm sending it to this H3000 and the whole verb, which if I hop into the effects side, so all of these channels here are all of my effects. Kind of these are the main global effects, and then here we have the lead vocal effects, then BVs, strings, keys, guitar effects, bass effects, and drums. Now I don't use all of them at once. They're just there if I need access to them. They're available for me as part of my template. But in this case, I was mainly using this H3000, which is this Eventide plugin, fantastic plugin, but it does so much. Honestly, you can flick through these presets forever. Like this, they've got loads of sounds that they can do. So I have these two presets set up that are basically just like with presets. They kind of sound like the Micro Shift plugin, but doing their own unique version of that. And then the whole effect and stuff like that in the vocals is usually a vintage verb is what I go for. Just on default, it sounds great. Maybe I might play with the filter slightly, but in this case, I did not. So if I go into the whole of the global effects, we were using Seventh Heaven on this instead, provide a slightly different sound to the lead vocal whole if need be. And I also find myself, all these are the delays, basically the vocal delays, and here I've got it set up that I can also patch them to the reverbs. So if I want my 1 second delay to go to a whole verb or a mono verb, that's all there, and I can just turn them on. They're all set up, which is great. Saves me a little bit of time. Looking at the template, this was actually a bit of an older one where I had this kind of stemming setup going in case I wanted to bounce out stems, but I've actually gotten rid of that now because it was just taking up CPU. But besides that, everything is going to this rear bus. I've got all these are kind of my main food groups. This is where all the sounds are bussed into. So if I needed a last stage of changing levels or anything, they're all here. But they all send to this rear bus, which is this. And this is a technique I had picked up from watching Andrew Sheps. He always talks about it quite a lot, which is having a parallel compression on your whole mix, basically. And like this, I'm sending individually everything to this rear bus. The only difference is the drums. I always tend to pull down a bit because they react quite heavily on the compressor. And then it's a simple 1176 on the lowest ratio, kind of swimming in compression, they say. So it's living between 3 and 5, you know, anywhere in this region. And then you just mix it to taste. And I've always enjoyed the sound of that. I quite like what it adds, especially with effects, because in the bits where, say, a singer stops singing because they tend to be the loudest part of a mix, you know, the guitars come up, the effects come up, everything just kind of comes up, and then it just swims in this constant exciting level. I guess it's quite, I don't know, the sound it provides, I find, always benefits my mixes. So I would recommend trying it out, see how it works. It does require a bit of setup, but you do get a lot of energy from that. You know, you have to be careful with it because you can overdo it. It does add volume to your mix, so like, don't just think that it's getting more exciting because it's getting louder. You should just pay attention to what it's actually bringing to the mix. But going into the vocals, as you can see here, these are all of my lead vocals, and I bust them into one channel. All of the lead vocals go into a parallel compression, which again 1176, just on all the buttons in. Pretty slow attack and fast-ish release, but just kind of bringing that vocal to the front. And then again, I'm going through adding a little bit of saturation towards the end of the song on the vocals, a lot of de-essing to account for any harsh S's and T's that the saturation brings out. And then I do have this crystallizer effect going on in the middle eight. So if I skip to the middle eight.
He never wanted me to go too far. He never wanted me to speak my mind. You ever wanted
So
me
we're using it as mainly a delay, more like a granular delay. When I use this, I find that I tend to push it an octave up, and you get this, let's see, 1200. You get this kind of effect. But in this case, we're using it on 0, and it's just kind of adding a really creative, stuttery delay to that section. Again, just a bit of something different. And then that is going into a mid-side thing, just adding a little bit of width to that and making the low end mono. That's about it. And then some OTT to, again, add some flavor to the sound, but very barely touching it at about 16%. And then the BVs, again, I do love sticking this 33609 on the BVs. There's this background vocals preset, which just works for me every time. And this, again, just keeps the vocals in place, at least the backing vocals, because I do like them to be a lot more compressed than the lead, just to keep them more in your face, especially because they're on the sides.
Does she ever do you like that? Think of me when it's her that you're holding.
Not hitting the needle too hard, but it's on a ratio of 3:1, so it's just kind of, again, just keeping them safe and keeping them more upfront, which is great. And then last but not least, in terms of kind of final stages, this is my mix bus here where I put all of my final set of plugins on, and this is where I personally rely on a lot of the sound of my mix to come from, because I really like working into this Townhouse bus compressor. It's kind of like an old school SSL compressor. Sounds great as a bus compressor, but it actually provides quite a tone to your song, and which I really like. It brightens it and gives it a lot more presence. And let me just turn off this whole chain of plugins and show you what it does one by one. I'm just gonna drop in the verse and let's see what it sounds like.
Betty told her I'm just no one not to worry. Been together since forever was a hurry. Trying to write as in a chapter of his story. Don't wanna be a second option, I'm not sorry. Said you got a girl, but she's too boring. For how long could you keep ignoring? Faking, lying to somebody. It's been years since
So you're basically just adding a lot more brightness. Without it, it's just a bit dull
Betty told her I'm just no one not to
and
worry.
quieter.
Been together since forever was a hurry. Trying to write as in a chapter of his story.
And then lastly, just finishing it off with Gullfoss and the God Particle. These are more mastering plugins, I guess. Gullfoss is quite subtle, I find.
Betty told her I'm just no one not to worry. Been together since
A bit more top end, and then
trying to write as in a chapter of his story.
this doing,
Be a second option, I'm not sorry. Said you got a girl, but she's
and lastly the God Particle just doing some final kind of compression overall, some multi-band compression, a little bit of limiting, which in this case is turned off because I would have sent it to be mastered separately by, again, my guy Jordan Timms. Lastly, this does go into Sonarworks, which I will use for calibrating my speakers, but then obviously I'll turn that off at the end when I send it out. That's just for my listening benefit. But that's pretty much the track. That's the whole process between the production and the mix. Obviously, I have to thank Feds for helping out with the writing. She did a fantastic job on this. For me, this was, you know, kind of making music and working on all of the production side, which I love. So it was a really fun endeavor, and I do really like this type of music. So for me, it was very exciting to work on. And again, shout out to Timea for actually being the main artist on this, and she smashed it, and the vocals sound great. And I hope she's equally as happy with the song as we are. So all in all, I think it was a really great experience to work on, and yeah, hopefully if you enjoyed this video, I'll plan on making more of these. I've got a bunch of songs I've been working on that are coming out very soon, so when they come out I can talk about them freely. In the meantime though, if you enjoyed this video, please let us know below. Leave a comment, let us know what you think, and a like and all that stuff. I would appreciate if you subscribed. It really helps massively with the growth of this channel. And once again, thank you to everyone who's done that so far. It's been a great help. But yeah, once again, I've been Chris Vella, and I'll see you in the next one.